December 30th turned an ordinary grocery store into a full-on anthill. "Miss, are you grabbing a cart, or are you just standing there?" Marina flinched and stepped back from the entrance, letting an irritated woman with 2 kids push past. The cart clattered by, bumping Marina's bag on the way. Marina grabbed her own cart and disappeared into the stream of shoppers. Holiday music boomed overhead. Somewhere near the registers, a child was screaming for a candy bar. The smell of clementines mixed with the scent of fresh baked goods, and that combo made her a little lightheaded. Mom always used to make a list, she thought, stopping by the olive shelf. 3 years ago, the 3 of them had come to this same store. Dad pushed the cart and joked that prices always jumped for the holidays. Mom methodically crossed items off her notepad, and Marina tossed random stuff into the cart. Spanish cured ham, French cheese. Then they'd go home. The kitchen would turn into this fun kind of chaos, and by midnight, the table would be loaded with salads, roasted turkey, and Mom's signature cake. Now that Notepad didn't exist, just like the home that smelled like vanilla and cinnamon didn't exist, the one where a floorboard creaked by the front door, where family photos hung on the wall. Marina swallowed the lump rising in her throat and firmly dropped a jar of olives into the cart. No time for tears. Her first New Year's with Edward was the start of something new, a new tradition, a new life. Her phone buzzed in her pocket. A text from Edward. "Meeting's running long. Maybe a restaurant after all? I didn't cancel the reservation." She typed back, "Edward, we already agreed. Your aunt's place. Calm, cozy, just the 2 of us." His reply came instantly. "Fine. Just don't cook a ton. I'm on a diet." On a diet. On December 31st. Marina put the phone away and rolled her cart forward. Edward had come into her life a year ago. Tall, well-groomed, with the confident smile of a man used to getting what he wanted. A company party at a trendy restaurant downtown. She'd been standing by the floor-to-ceiling window with a glass of Prosecco, looking out at the snow-covered city, when he suddenly appeared beside her. "Spending the holiday alone? That should be illegal." She laughed. "I'm here with co-workers. I just like watching the city lights." "Then let's watch them together." So they watched. Then they danced. He walked her to her Uber and asked for her number. 3 days later, he invited her to dinner at a Michelin-starred place where the bill for 2 was equal to her monthly paycheck. Marina had felt awkward in her simple black dress among women in evening gowns, but Edward was so attentive and polished that the tension gradually faded. He brought flowers, took her to premieres, invited her to country clubs. 4 months ago, he proposed in that same restaurant where they'd had their first dinner. The waiter brought dessert, and inside the chocolate mousse sat a diamond ring. "Marina, you're smart, beautiful, reliable. I want you to be my wife." Reliable. Back then, that word had sounded like a compliment. Now, standing in line for duck breast, Marina suddenly realized he'd never once said, "I love you." Not once had he asked how she felt, what she dreamed about. He picked the restaurants, the travel routes, even the movies, and she went along with it. Because after her parents died, a hollow space opened up in her life, and Edward filled it with his energy, his decisions, his presence. Or maybe she was just tired of being alone. "Next," the butcher called, and Marina snapped back to herself. "Duck breast, please, about 1.5 pounds." While the meat was being weighed, she remembered the call from Aunt Helen 2 days ago. "Marina, can you believe it? Victor found an amazing deal to the Maldives. We fly out the day after tomorrow." "I'm freaking out. I don't even have a decent swimsuit." Marina laughed. "Aunt Helen, are you serious? What about the holiday?" "We'll celebrate under palm trees with cocktails. Listen, keep an eye on the house. Will you feed Marcus? I stocked the fridge, left some expensive wine. You can even throw a party if you want. Aunt Helen, Edward and I still haven't decided where we're going." "Then decide. The house is sitting empty. Heat's on. You'll light the fireplace. Perfect. Marcus is bored without people. The keys are with the gatehouse. I already told them. Aunt Helen had always been impulsive. At 54, she wore bright scarves, dyed her hair chestnut with a copper shine, and ran a travel agency. After Marina's parents died, her aunt was the one who kept her from drowning in grief, calling every day, showing up with homemade pies, dragging her to the theater. Don't overthink it. Do it. Life's too short to sit around deciding. And Marina did it. She offered Edward a compromise, not a loud restaurant, not his parents' place out in the suburbs where she felt like an outsider, and not their apartment with its empty walls. The house. Quiet, cozy, romantic. Edward pushed back. Marina, come on. That's I don't know. 2 hours on the road. What if we hit traffic? There's a fireplace, champagne by the fire, and silence. I get plenty of silence at home. But she didn't budge, and he finally gave in. Fine, but I'll show up later. Client meeting, can't cancel it. I'll be there around 10. Over the last week, the plans had changed so often Marina couldn't keep up. Restaurant downtown. No, to Edward's friend's apartment. No, his parents will be offended. No, back to the restaurant. Her head was spinning, and the only thing she wanted was for them to finally decide and stop. Now it was decided. Tomorrow, December 31st, she'd get off work at 3, drive to the house, cook dinner, and meet Edward. Calm. Homey. Marina reached the checkout and unloaded her groceries onto the belt. Duck, apples, butter, potatoes, carrots, celery, mustard, honey, fresh rosemary. She could practically see the recipes from her great-grandmother's notebook, battered, yellowed pages with neat, careful handwriting. The notebook had come to Marina from her grandmother, along with stories about the hard years long ago, when her great-grandmother somehow turned even the smallest amount of food into a little celebration. Need bags? The cashier asked without looking up. Yes, 2 big ones. While the receipt printed, Marina stared out the window. Snow swirled outside, big, slow flakes settling on parked cars, on people's shoulders, on tree branches. The city glowed with lights. People hurried along with bags, gift boxes, bouquets. Their faces looked tired, but there was excitement too. Tomorrow, a new page, a new chance. Marina paid, hoisted the heavy bags, and stepped outside. The cold air smacked her in the face. Somewhere music was playing, somewhere people were laughing. Something inside her shifted, not fear, not anxiety, but a strange, almost forgotten feeling. A hunch. Like life, frozen 3 years ago on that terrible night on the slick road, had suddenly started moving again. Marina adjusted the bags in her hands and headed to the subway. Snowflakes melted on her cheeks, and hope warmed in her chest. Tomorrow would be good. It had to be. The gate arm lifted, and Marina drove into the neighborhood. The pine forest greeted her with emptiness. Snowy streets lined with houses sat dark. Only here and there a string of lights blinked on a front porch. Most people had gone back to the city or flown off to someplace warm. Her aunt's house sat deep on the lot behind a tall wooden fence. Marina parked by the small gate, turned off the engine, and sat still for a few seconds, listening to the quiet. No city roar out here, only the soft hiss of falling snow and the distant bark of a dog. A porch light burned. Warm yellow light spilled onto the steps, onto the evergreen branches by the entrance. The house looked like a Christmas card. Marina got out, and the cold immediately cut through her coat. 12 degrees below. She pulled the grocery bags from the trunk and half dragged them up to the porch. The keys were under the doormat in a little metal box, one of her aunt's quirks. If I lose my purse, at least I can still get inside, she'd say. The door opened with a soft creak. Inside it smelled like wood, lavender, and the faintest hint of cat food. "Marcus!" Marina called, kicking off her boots. From deeper in the house came an annoyed meow, and a large gray-blue British Shorthair strutted into the entryway. He stopped a couple feet away, looked her over with yellow eyes, and let out a long, drawn-out, "Mrrr." "I know, you're hungry. I'll feed you." The cat graciously allowed her to scratch behind his ear, then pressed his face into her palm. Marina walked into the kitchen. The fridge was packed. Cheeses, cured meats, vegetables, fruit, 3 bottles of wine, containers of ready-made broth, jars of pâté. She opened one jar and spooned some into a bowl. The house was spacious and bright. A big living room with a fireplace, soft couches, bookshelves up to the ceiling, and in the corner, an old piano draped with a lace cover. Marina turned on music. Jazz floated from the speakers, smooth saxophone, an unhurried bass. The sound filled the rooms, and instantly everything felt cozier. She washed her hands, grabbed a cutting board, laid out the groceries. Duck breast, apples, carrots, onion, celery. The knife slid into the onion. Marina worked with real pleasure. This was her time, her ritual. In moments like these, her head cleared of worry, and all that remained was the simple joy of the process. Her grandmother had taught her to cook when she was a kid. See, Marina, cooking isn't just food, it's care. You put love into it, and a person feels it. And if you don't put love into it, then it's just food, filling but empty. The duck sizzled in the pan, spreading the smell of rosemary and garlic. Marina turned the pieces, splashed in wine, lowered the heat. She sliced apples into wedges, arranged them around the meat, sprinkled cinnamon, slid everything into the oven, and set a timer. Outside, dusk had settled in. 5:45 p.m. She stepped onto the back porch to toss the peelings. Cold air burned her face. Marina snapped the trash bin lid shut and was already turning back to the door when she caught movement out of the corner of her eye. A silhouette stood by the gate. Her heart jumped. "Hey!" she called, and her voice came out uncertain. "Do you need something?" The silhouette didn't move. Marina found the switch for the extra floodlight. Click, and the yard filled with cold white light. By the gate stood an elderly woman in a long dark navy coat with a fur collar, a knitted hat pulled down over her head. She stood perfectly still, staring into nothing. Her face was pale, her lips nearly blue. Marina ran to the gate. "Hi, are you okay? What happened?" The old woman slowly turned her head. Her eyes were cloudy, lost. "I live here," she murmured in a quiet, trembling voice. "With Arthur. Apartment on the 3rd floor." "What apartment?" Marina took her hand, ice cold, fingers barely bending. "Oh my God, you're freezing. How long have you been standing out here?" "Arthur needs to be met. He's walking home from school. He'll get lost." Marina understood. The woman was confused. Dementia, probably. There wasn't a soul around, and all the houses were dark. "What's your name?" Marina wrapped an arm around her shoulders and turned her toward the house. "Come on, it's so cold out here." "Clara. My name is Clara." The woman obediently walked, leaning on Marina. "Tonight's the concert. We have to make it." In the warmth, Clara swayed. Marina barely caught her in time and lowered her into a chair by the fireplace. Her face looked waxy, her lips trembled. Marina quickly built a fire, paper, kindling, a log. The flames caught. Marina pulled off Clara's damp hat, gray hair, neatly twisted into a bun, an intelligent face, delicate features. Marcus came over, sniffed the old woman, rubbed against her leg. The woman gave a weak smile and reached out with a shaking hand. "Nice. Fluffy." Marina checked the coat pockets. In the right one, a handkerchief with embroidered initials. CM. Nothing else. The lining of the inner pocket had a hole. She grabbed her phone, found the number for the local police station, and called. Long rings, then a tired male voice. "Dispatch. Hi. I found an elderly woman by my gate. She's confused, doesn't remember her address. She's really cold." "Is her life in danger?" "No, I brought her inside. She's warming up." "It's a holiday. All crews are out on calls. Can you wait until morning? No missing person reports yet. Or bring her in yourself." Marina looked out the window. The snowfall had thickened, a white storm spinning outside the glass. 12 below. Hauling a sick woman through the night in that kind of cold. "I'll think about it. Thank you." She pressed her forehead to the cold glass. Someone else's house. A stranger. But leaving an old woman outside in the freezing dark, impossible. Marina went back to the living room. Clara was dozing in the chair. "Are you hungry?" The old woman opened her eyes. "Yes, I'm hungry." Marina warmed up broth, poured it into a bowl, added herbs, brought it with bread. Clara ate slowly, carefully wiping her lips with a napkin after each spoonful. You could tell she'd once had good manners. When the bowl was empty, she sank back into the chair. Tired, very tired. Marina made up the wide couch, helped Clara over, laid her down, and tucked a blanket around her. "Thank you, sweetheart," the old woman whispered. "You're kind." Marina felt something tighten inside her. Sleep. Everything's going to be okay. A minute later, Clara's breathing evened out. Marina went back to the kitchen. The oven was beeping. She pulled out the tray. The meat was browned, the apples caramelized. The smell was incredible, but she had no appetite. She kept cooking almost on autopilot, chopping vegetables for a salad, boiling potatoes, but her thoughts stayed on Clara. Who was she? Who was this Arthur? How had she ended up alone in the freezing cold? And what would Edward say? Marina stopped, the knife hovering over the cutting board. Edward. She pictured his face when he walked in and saw an old woman asleep on the couch. He wouldn't be happy. He'd want to know why Marina let a stranger into the house. But how could she explain something she didn't fully understand herself? She just couldn't do anything else. Marina set the table in the dining room. White tablecloth, candles, glasses, duck on a platter. Everything the way she'd planned. Only now it all felt somehow unreal. Her phone buzzed, a text from Edward. "Leaving in an hour, wait for me." She put the phone down and went to the window. A blizzard spun outside the glass. In the living room, the fire crackled softly. From the darkness, her own reflection stared back, pale face, tired eyes, slumped shoulders. Tomorrow, a new year would start, but Marina suddenly understood. It had already started. Right now. The car alarm chirped outside the window. Marina stepped onto the porch. Edward was coming up the steps, tall, in an expensive puffer jacket, a bouquet of roses in one hand and a bottle of bourbon in the other. He smiled like a man pleased with his own grand entrance. "My beautiful girl." He kissed her, carrying the scent of pricey cologne and winter cold. Marina forced a smile. She didn't look beautiful at all. Her hair was a mess. There was a broth stain on her cardigan and shadows under her eyes from exhaustion. But Edward never noticed details. "Come in, you'll freeze." He walked inside, looking around like someone evaluating real estate. "Not bad. The fireplace works." "It does. Edward, we need to talk. Something happened." "Something serious?" He was pulling off his jacket. Under it, a suit, dark gray, perfectly pressed. Even out here, he showed up like he was headed to a business meeting. She led him into the living room. The door was slightly open. On the wide couch, wrapped in a blanket, Clara was asleep. Gray hair spread across the pillow, her face calm, her breathing steady. Edward froze in the doorway. "What is this supposed to be?" His voice went cold. "Quiet," Marina said, taking his hand and pulling him toward the kitchen. "Don't wake her. I'll explain." She told him quickly, how she'd found the old woman by the gate, freezing, how she couldn't leave her out in the cold. Edward listened, and with every second his face hardened. "You've got to be kidding me. You picked up some street drifter. Marina, this isn't a puppy." "She's not a drifter. You can tell. She's from a decent family. She just got lost. She has dementia. I don't care what she has. He lowered his voice. You let a stranger into someone else's house. What if her family shows up and says you kidnapped her? Kidnapped her? Marina recoiled. She was dying out there. Then you should have called the police. I did. They said not until morning. It's 12 below out there. And that's why you opened a boarding house. Edward rubbed the bridge of his nose. Fine. She can stay the night, and that's it. Tomorrow you take her to the station. He said it like a sentence. Marina nodded, even though something inside her didn't agree. Let's eat. I'm starving. They went into the dining room. Edward sat down and tried the salad. Not bad. Homemade mayo? Yeah. Good job. And then he started talking about a deal he'd closed this week, a big contract, praise from the director, plans for next year, a possible promotion. He talked with energy, waving his fork around. Marina listened and felt the tiredness roll over her. Not physical, something deeper. Edward didn't ask how her day had been, didn't ask if she was exhausted. He just talked, and she was supposed to listen and admire him. It had always been that way. She'd just never paid attention before. Footsteps came from the living room, then a frightened voice. Where am I? Arthur, are you here? Marina jumped up. Clara was standing in the middle of the room barefoot, looking around with unfocused eyes. Clara, it's okay. Do you need something? The bathroom. Of course. Come on. Marina led her there and waited outside the door. Edward stood in the dining room doorway, making a point of checking his watch. When Clara fell asleep again, Marina returned to the dining room. Edward had already poured himself bourbon and was leaning back in his chair. Listen, this is impossible, he said sharply. I worked all day, drove through traffic. I wanted to spend the evening with you. Get her dressed and take her to the police. Or I'll take her myself. Edward, it's almost midnight. Marina heard her own voice like it belonged to someone else. Flat, quiet. It's freezing outside. She's sick. That's cruel. Cruel? He smirked. Did you think about me? You turned somebody else's house into a shelter. She isn't homeless. I don't give a damn. He slapped his palm on the table, making the candles tremble. I'm not spending New Year's with some random sick old woman. Marina felt something snap inside her. Edward stood up, walked into the living room, stopped by the couch, leaned down, and shook Clara by the shoulder. Get up! We're going! The old woman shrank back, her lips trembling. Edward, stop! Marina grabbed his arm. You're scaring her. He brushed her off, grabbed Clara's coat, and tossed it onto her knees. Get dressed. We're going. No. Clara covered her face with her hands. Cold. Edward threw the coat on the floor and nudged it toward the doorway with the toe of his boot. In that moment, Marina saw him. Not the Edward she'd known for a year, not the successful manager in a pricey suit, not the generous guy with bouquets of roses, the one who'd always been there, just hidden behind the facade. Cruel, selfish, cold to other people's pain. She saw their future, how he'd shove her aside the same way if she ever got sick, how he'd say, "Don't make a scene," if she cried. Edward, she said quietly. Leave. He didn't hear her, still dragging Clara toward the door. Edward, leave this house. He turned. What? Leave. I don't want to see you anymore. He froze, then let go of the old woman's hand. Clara sank back onto the couch. Are you out of your mind? He laughed, unsure. Because of this drifter? No, Marina shook her head. Because I just saw who you really are. Do you even understand who you're talking to? I'm the best thing that ever happened to you. I brought you flowers, took you to restaurants I proposed. You brought flowers to look generous. You took me to restaurants to show off how successful you are. You proposed because I fit your criteria for a convenient wife. Marina flung the door open and cold air rushed into the house. And now you're trying to throw a sick woman out into the freezing night. That's enough for me." Edward's face twisted. "You'll regret this. You won't find another guy like me." "I hope not," Marina breathed. He grabbed his puffer jacket, shoving his arms into the sleeves as he moved. "Stay with your drifters." He slammed the door so hard the windows rattled. Marina stood motionless, listening as the engine started, as the car tore off with a screech of tires. The sound dissolved into the night. Silence. Marina locked the door and turned the key. She leaned her forehead against the cold wood. Her hands were shaking, her legs felt like cotton. She'd ended her engagement. 1 hour before New Year's. A soft sob came from the living room. Clara sat on the couch with her face in her hands. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "I didn't mean to. I'm sorry." "Hush, hush." Marina sank down beside her and wrapped her arms around the old woman. "You didn't do anything wrong. You're safe." Clara clung to her like a child. Marina stroked her gray hair until her breathing steadied. "Sleep," the old woman murmured. "I want to sleep. Sleep. I'm right here." When Clara fell asleep, Marina went back to the dining room. The candles were burning down, wax sliding over the holders. The food was cold, the glasses empty. She slipped the diamond ring off her finger, stared at it for a few seconds, walked to the trash can, and opened her hand. The ring dropped with a light metallic ping, disappearing among peelings and scraps. Marina lowered her head onto her crossed arms and cried, quietly, almost soundless. From exhaustion, from disappointment, from fear, how to live alone again. But through the tears, something else pushed through too. Relief, deep and almost physical. She'd freed herself from pretending, from always having to adjust. Marina lifted her head and wiped her face. Outside, a firework boomed. Colored lights flared in the dark. She checked the time, 11:45 p.m., 15 minutes to New Year's. She washed her face, fixed her hair, found champagne in the fridge, and poured one glass. She turned on the TV. There was a holiday broadcast from Times Square. Crowds of people, lights, hosts talking about the year ending and hopes ahead. Marina sat there holding the glass, watching the bubbles rising from the bottom, tiny, stubborn. On the screen, the countdown began. 10, 9, 8. She raised her glass. 7, 6, 5. She closed her eyes. 4, 3, 2, 1. "Let me find someone in the new year who shares my values," Marina whispered, and drank it in one go. Something warm touched her elbow. Marcus was sitting on the table, looking at her with yellow eyes, purring. He rubbed his face against her hand. "At least I've got you, Fluffball." The cat curled up beside her. The warmth of a living creature. Simple trust. Everything she'd been missing. Slowly her breathing evened out. The knot in her throat loosened. Marina stood up and started clearing the table. Using her hands helped. Her thoughts got sharper, her emotions quieter. Passing the entryway, she saw Clara's coat on a chair, still damp. She picked it up, carried it to the radiator, and smoothed it on a hanger. And then she noticed a corner of paper was sticking out of the inside pocket. She carefully pulled out a sheet folded into quarters. The paper was worn, like it had been carried around for a long time. She unfolded it. The handwriting was large and clear, written in black ink, careful and neat. Clara Matthews, if you found this woman, please call 9145-550173. This is very important. Arthur Matthews. Marina exhaled. The weight that had been pressing on her shoulders all evening crumbled. Someone was looking for her. Clara had family. She grabbed her phone and dialed. It was already after midnight. Rude. But on New Year's, people are awake. And if Arthur was searching for his grandmother, every minute mattered. Long rings. 1, 2, 3. Click. "Hello?" A man's voice, panicked, breaking. Marina spoke fast. I'm sorry it's so late. I found Clara Matthews. Silence. Then, Grandma? You found my grandma. Where is she? How is she? Is she alive? She's alive. She's okay. She's with me. Warm. She ate. She's sleeping. I found her by the gate, freezing, and brought her inside. Thank God. His voice shook. The address. Give me the address. Marina gave it to him. I'm leaving right now, he said. About 40 minutes. Thank you. I don't even know how to thank you. You don't have to. Just come. Marina put the kettle on, took out cups, set cookies on a plate. A strange New Year's. First the breakup with her fiancé, then an old woman lost in a blizzard, and now meeting a stranger in the middle of the night. But she wasn't scared, only curious, and a light, almost weightless hope that none of this was random. A sharp ring at the door. Marina opened it. A man stood on the porch, tall, lean, in jeans and a stretched-out gray sweater. No hat, blonde hair wet with snow, thin-framed glasses on his nose, a backpack over his shoulders. His face was pale and drained, but his gray eyes burned with hope. Arthur Matthews, he breathed. Thank you. I don't even know what to say. You could tell he'd been running, terrified he'd be too late. Marina, come in. She's sleeping in the living room. Arthur kicked off his boots fast, dropped his backpack, and followed on tiptoe. The living room met them with silence and the warm glow of a nightlight. Clara lay on the couch under the blanket. Arthur froze in the doorway, staring at her like he was afraid to blink. Then he moved closer, sank to his knees, and took her hand in his. Grandma, he whispered. Grandma, it's me. Clara opened her eyes and stared for a few seconds with that unfocused look. Then something clicked in her mind, and her face lit up with a smile. Arthur, Clara whispered. You came. I thought you were at school. I'm here. Arthur stroked her hand, and Marina could see his fingers trembling. I'm here. It's okay. I got lost. The old woman began to cry without sound, tears sliding down her cheeks. It was cold. I didn't know where to go. I was scared. Now you're with me. You won't get lost again. I promise. He leaned in and kissed her forehead. Marina stood by the door, turned away, wiping her eyes. It was silly to cry over other people's happiness, but she couldn't stop. It was too real. Tired, Clara murmured. Can I sleep a little more? Arthur looked at Marina. She nodded. Sleep, Grandma. He adjusted the blanket, tucked her in warmer. Rest. I'm right here. Clara smiled that childlike, trusting smile and closed her eyes. Arthur stood up and walked over to Marina. He was silent for a moment. Then he let out a breath. You saved her life. I just couldn't walk past her. Marina shrugged. It's 12 below. In her condition, another hour, and it could have been too late. He pulled a bottle of wine and a box of chocolates from his backpack. I grabbed what I had at home. I know it's nothing after what you did. You don't have to, really. Will you at least have some tea with me? It's New Year's. Arthur smiled for the first time, tired but warm. Marina looked at his exhausted face, the glasses sliding down his nose, hands still trembling. And she realized she wanted to have tea with him. She wanted to know who he was. Okay, tea it is. They went into the kitchen. Marina poured boiling water into mugs. Arthur sat down, took off his glasses, and wiped them with the edge of his sweater. Without them, he looked younger. Marina set a plate of cookies in front of him, along with cheese and grapes. I'm sorry for all the trouble, he said quietly. On a night like this, after everything... Stop, Marina waved him off. I'm alone anyway. The words slipped out on their own. She stared into her mug. Arthur looked at her more closely. Without the glasses, his eyes seemed unbelievably clear, gray with tiny golden flecks near the pupils. Alone? On New Year's? My parents died 3 years ago. she said evenly, without extra emotion. She'd learned to say it like a fact. A car crash, winter road, black ice, and my fiancé, my ex-fiancé, turned out to be the wrong person. We split tonight. She looked up, expecting polite sympathy, but Arthur just nodded. I'm sorry about your parents. That never fully goes away. You just learn how to live with it. And about your fiancé, then he wasn't your person. Something warm spread in her chest. Not pity, not condescension, just understanding. Thank you for not asking for details. It's your story. You decide if you want to share it. They sat in silence for a moment. How did Clara end up by the gate? Marina asked. Arthur leaned back, rubbing the bridge of his nose, the kind of gesture that gives away sleepless nights. Long story. He gave a small, tired laugh. Actually, no. A normal one. Just a painful one. He started talking, and Marina listened, forgetting about the tea. Arthur had been a sickly kid. Asthma, allergies, endless colds. His parents worked. His mother built a career at a finance firm. His father grew a business. They barely had time for a sick son. Not that they didn't love him. Money and status just mattered more to them. Grandma Clara became his whole world. Back then, she worked as a pianist with the symphony orchestra. But even with that, she found time. Took Arthur to lessons, sat up with him through asthma attacks, read aloud, taught him music. She used to say, Arthur smiled, staring into space, music doesn't heal the body, it heals the soul. And when the soul is healthy, the body follows. She taught me to play. I didn't become a pro. I chose programming. Quieter, more stable. I can work from home. But I still play for her. Grandpa Andrew died in 2016. He was a conductor, a man with an iron will, collapsed after a rehearsal, a second stroke. After that, Grandma started changing. At first it was little things, forgetting names, mixing up concert dates. Then it got worse. In 2018, the doctors diagnosed her. Dementia, Alzheimer's, early stage. By then, Arthur was already working remote as a software developer. When he heard the diagnosis, he packed up and moved in with his grandmother. My mom was against it, he said calmly, but Marina could hear the pain under the words. She said I was ruining my life. That a young man should think about his career, about a family, not about some sick old woman. She used that exact word, old woman, about her own mother. Marina clenched her fists under the table. She knew people like that. Edward was one of them. In 2020, my sister got married. The young couple needed a place to live. Our parents offered to give them Grandma's apartment and move Clara in with them. I said no. I knew she'd just waste away there. In 2021, I rented a cheaper place in Westchester and took Grandma with me. My parents got offended and stopped calling. My sister texts sometimes. He took a breath. Grandma raised me while my parents were busy. I'm not doing this out of duty. I love her. Not because I'm supposed to, but because I can't do it any other way. In the last few months, she started wandering. He rubbed his face with his palms. The first time was in October. She went out to the store, got on a bus, rode a few stops, forgot where she was going. The second time was in December at night. I woke up. She was gone. I searched for 2 hours, called the police. They found her 2 blocks away, walking somewhere, saying she was late for a concert. His voice shook. I put an alarm on the door, but today my sister called and started screaming that Grandma's apartment should go to her family. I snapped, "We fought." I didn't hear the alarm. When I realized, it was already 5:30. I called every hospital, the police, drove around neighborhoods. He went quiet, eyes closed. I thought I'd lost her, that they'd find her in the morning, frozen, and it would be my fault. Marina reached out and covered his hand with hers. You found her alive. You're not to blame. You're doing more than most people would ever do in your place. Arthur opened his eyes and looked at their hands. He didn't pull away. Sometimes I'm just tired, he said softly. So tired I want to drop everything. But then I look at her, and I can't. Marina squeezed his hand. I had a grandma too. She taught me how to cook, and she gave me her mother's recipe notebook. The entries are dated from the 50s and 60s. Every recipe is a memory. Grandma used to say, when you cook, you're talking to the past. Arthur nodded. We're the same. We remember. We hold on. We don't abandon people. Yeah, Marina smiled through tears. We don't. Somewhere in the house, a clock ticked. Marcus padded down the hallway, purring. And your fiancé? Arthur began carefully. If you don't mind me asking. What happened? Marina told him briefly. How Edward tried to throw Clara out into the freezing night. How he dragged her toward the door. How he tossed her coat onto the floor. Arthur's face turned harder with every word. And you broke up because of your grandma? No, Marina shook her head. Because I saw who he really is. People show their true face under stress. The mask comes off. Yeah. And I realized I don't want to live with someone who can hurt the defenseless. You realized the right thing. The silence between them felt warm, like they'd known each other not for 2 hours, but for years. Marina suddenly realized they'd been talking for more than 2 hours. With Edward, she always watched the clock, counting down the minutes until his monologues ended. With Arthur, she'd forgotten time existed. He was funny, sharp in a clean way, never gross. When he told her how his grandma came home in October with someone else's dog, found her on the street, she says she got lost. The dog, not her. Marina laughed until she cried. He was well-read, could easily talk about new novels, argue about the classics. With him, she could just be herself, not choosing every word, not trying to seem better. It felt unfamiliar and unbelievably good. At 3 a.m, Arthur got up to check on his grandma. When he came back, he smiled. She's sleeping hard, looks peaceful. She's sweet. You can tell she used to be really refined. Her manners, the way she talks. She played with the best conductors, toured Europe. I remember when I was a kid she used to tell me about Carnegie Hall. Said the acoustics there are magic. The sound is born and just floats like a bird. He looked at the piano in the corner. Can I? Of course. They went into the living room. Arthur lifted the cover off the piano, opened it, ran his fingers over the keys. Then he started playing. Beethoven's Moonlight Sonata, first movement, slow and thoughtful. Marina stood by the window with her eyes closed. The music filled the space, slipping into every corner of the house. Arthur finished, his hands resting on the keys. My grandma taught me. She doesn't remember notes anymore, can't name a piece, but she recognizes music. When I play, she smiles and comes back for a few minutes. Like music is a bridge between who she was and who she is now. Marina walked over and sat beside him. That's the most beautiful thing I've ever heard. Not the music. What you just said. Arthur turned. Their faces were very close. Marina could see the exhaustion in his eyes, the fine lines at the corners, the light stubble, and something else. Warmth, openness, a rare kind of honesty. Outside, the sky was starting to lighten. Arthur yawned, embarrassed. I'm sorry. Can I crash somewhere? Right here so I can stay close to Grandma. There's a guest bedroom. Come on. They went upstairs. Thank you for everything, Marina, he said. For Grandma, for the conversation, for existing. Good night, Arthur. Good night, Marina. She lay down without even changing and closed her eyes. Thoughts spun, returning to Arthur. His eyes, his voice, his hands on the keys. The way he talked about his grandma with so much love, it made her chest ache. He was different. Real. No masks, no games. And that was scary, because Marina suddenly realized she didn't want him to leave in the morning and disappear from her life. Outside the window, the first morning of the new year was blooming. Marina smiled into the dark. She opened her eyes and didn't immediately understand where she was. An unfamiliar ceiling, wooden beams. Then her memory came back. What woke her was the smell. Coffee. And something else. Toast. Eggs. Marina jumped up fast, pulled on jeans, swapped her wrinkled shirt for a sweater, and fixed her hair as she walked. Someone was quietly humming in the kitchen. Arthur stood at the stove, stirring scrambled eggs. In the same sweater as last night, hair messed up, glasses sliding down his nose. On the table, plates with toast, butter, jam, 2 mugs of coffee. He turned and smiled, a little shy. "Good morning. Hope you don't mind. I woke up early and thought, after last night, you could use breakfast. I found eggs and bread. Hope your aunt won't be mad." Marina stood in the doorway, looking at the scene, and felt something warm and fragile bloom in her chest. "That's really sweet. Thank you." The eggs were simple, but good. The coffee was strong. Outside, the sun was shining, clean January light reflecting off the snow so bright she had to squint. The conversation flowed easily, about how Marina hated cooking in the mornings, how Arthur learned living alone, how Marcus stole a piece of toast when Arthur got distracted. Marina caught herself just watching Arthur, how he spread butter on bread, how he wrinkled his nose at the hot coffee, how he smiled first with his eyes and then with his mouth. A rustle came from the living room, hesitant footsteps. Clara appeared in the doorway, disheveled, with that lost look. "Where am I? Arthur?" He stood up, walked over, and took her hand. "I'm here, Grandma. Come on, let's wash up and get you settled." He led her to the bathroom. Marina could hear water running, his quiet voice, the old woman answering in soft, unclear words. A few minutes later they came back, Clara washed, hair brushed, wearing a warm robe from Arthur's backpack. He sat her at the table and set down a bowl of oatmeal. The old woman stared at it without interest. "Grandma, you need to eat." He took a spoon, scooped up oatmeal, brought it to her lips. "Come on, 1 spoon at a time." He fed her slowly, patiently, wiped her with a napkin, and between spoonfuls told her how well she slept, how sunny it was today, how Marcus purred her a little song this morning. After breakfast, Arthur helped Clara to the couch, then went back to the kitchen and started gathering dishes. "Time to go home," he said, and there was regret in his voice. "Thank you for everything, Marina. For Grandma, for letting us stay, for being so kind." They got dressed and guided Clara outside. Arthur's car sat by the gate, old, a little rusty, but cared for. He helped his grandma into the back seat, tucked his puffer jacket around her, and buckled her in. Then he got behind the wheel and slid the key into the ignition. Arthur turned the key. The engine caught and then went quiet again. He frowned and tried once more. The same short rasp, then silence. He got out, popped the hood. "Battery," he sighed. "Dead. I should have replaced it back in the fall." He pulled out his phone and called roadside assistance. A short conversation, then he hung up with a frustrated look. "They say they won't get here before 3. New Year's. Half the crews aren't working." He opened a rideshare app. Long search, then the driver canceled. Another try. Another cancellation. Arthur put his phone away and rubbed his face with his hands. "Arthur." Marina touched his arm. "Don't torture yourself. Stay. The house is big. Wait for help, then leave calmly." He looked at her, hesitating. "We've already taken advantage of your hospitality." "Actually, it's the opposite," Marina smiled. "You kept me company. Honestly, I'm even glad. I don't want to be alone today." The words came out on their own, but they were true. She suddenly realized she didn't want to end up alone again in this big, quiet house. Arthur held her gaze for a long moment, then nodded. "Okay. Thank you." They brought Clara back inside. Marina lit the fireplace. The old woman settled into the armchair and dozed off almost immediately. Marcus walked over, jumped into her lap, and curled into a ball. In her sleep, Clara smiled and stroked the cat. "Let's go for a walk," Marina suggested. "While she's sleeping. The sun, the snow." Arthur looked at his grandma, then at Marina. 30 minutes, maybe. They bundled up and stepped into the yard. The world beyond the door sparkled. The snow lay like an untouched blanket, trees wearing white caps. The quiet was so thick it felt like you could hear every snowflake fall. Arthur bent down, packed a snowball, and turned to Marina with a mischievous grin. They played like kids, making them, throwing them, missing, laughing. Marina couldn't remember the last time she'd laughed so easily. With Edward, that never happened. He thought games like that were childish. Breathless, they stopped, standing knee-deep in snow. "I've been thinking," Arthur said, looking out at the snow-covered yard. "Maybe we should move somewhere out of town. Find a house with land where Grandma can walk safely, where there aren't cars and crowds. I can work remote." "She'd be calmer," Marina nodded. "And you would too." "I'm tired of the city, the noise. I dream about a garden, an orchard, quiet." "Me too," Marina admitted. "A house with a yard, a small greenhouse, growing herbs and vegetables, cooking with what I grew myself." They looked at each other, and there was understanding in that look. The same dreams, the same values. "And I love old movies," Arthur said. "I rewatch them every year." "Me too," Marina brightened. "That's a tradition from my parents." They found out they both loved classic literature and dreamed of hiking. Arthur used to go into the mountains, but the last few years he couldn't because of his grandma. Marina had wanted to try for a long time, but Edward thought it was ridiculous. "I'm working on a project," Arthur said. "An app for people with dementia. It helps them orient themselves, reminds them of their address, names of loved ones, important dates. There's a GPS feature if the person gets lost. I build it in my free time, almost finished." "That's incredible." Marina stopped and looked at him. "You're doing something that actually matters. I want to help people like my grandma, and their families. I know what it's like to search for someone and not know if they're alive." "Arthur!" came from inside the house. They looked at each other and ran back. Clara was awake, scanning the room anxiously. "I'm here, Grandma. Everything's okay." Marina went into the kitchen, reheated yesterday's duck, served the salad, set the table. They ate together, the three of them, Clara slowly, but with an appetite. Arthur kept giving her more, keeping an eye on her. After lunch, he stopped Marina when she started to clean up. "Let me. You've already done so much." He washed the dishes. She dried. They worked without talking, but there was something warm in that silence, something homey. Arthur's phone rang. "Yeah, got it. In an hour? Okay, thanks." He looked at Marina. "Roadside help will be here at 2. 1 hour until they'd have to say goodbye." They went back to the living room. Clara was asleep in the chair, Marcus curled up beside her. The fireplace crackled softly. Outside, the sun was sinking toward the horizon, throwing long blue shadows across the snow. Arthur stood by the window, Marina next to him. "You know," he said quietly, not turning around, "this was the strangest and the best New Year's of my life." Marina's heart started beating faster. "Mine too," she whispered. He turned. They were standing very close. Marina could see the light stubble, the crease between his brows, the reflection of the fire in his glasses. Arthur took a step forward. "Marina, Arthur," Clara called from the chair. The moment shattered. Arthur stepped back and went to his grandma. Marina stayed by the window, wrapping her arms around herself. Everything inside her was trembling. The mechanic worked fast and in silence. He hooked up the cables, and a minute later, the engine came to life. Arthur paid, walked the mechanic to the gate, and stood there, watching him go. Then he came back slowly. Marina was waiting on the porch, pulling her cardigan tighter around herself. The sun painted the snow in pink and gold. "Looks like that's it," Arthur said. His voice sounded even, but Marina heard what he wasn't saying. They went inside. Arthur gathered their things, and Marina helped quietly, brought Clara's coat, now dry from overnight, handed over her boots. The old woman sat by the fire, stroking Marcus. When Arthur came over, she lifted clear eyes to him, one of those rare moments when the illness stepped back. We're leaving, Grandma. Going home. Home, she repeated and smiled. Good. I'm tired. Arthur dressed her carefully. Coat, buttons, hat, scarf. Marina stood nearby, holding out gloves. Clara turned to her and took her hand. Thank you, sweetheart. You're a kind girl. Marina bent down and kissed the old woman's dry cheek. Take care of yourself. Clara touched Marina's face, like a mother calming her daughter. In the entryway, Marina and Arthur stood face to face. His grandma was already waiting in the car. He held out his hand. Marina put her palm in his. He squeezed and held on a beat longer than necessary. His fingers were warm, steady. Marina, I thank you for everything. You're amazing. She smiled, feeling her cheeks burn. You are too. A pause. Arthur didn't let go of her hand. He looked into her eyes, and there was so much in that look. Gratitude, shyness, something else he still didn't have words for. Can I call you, if you don't mind? Of course. Marina answered so quickly she surprised herself. Call me. He smiled for real for the first time, with no trace of exhaustion. The smile made him look younger, brighter. Okay, I will. The car started on the first try, rolled forward slowly, turned behind the trees. Marina stayed on the porch until the engine sound dissolved into silence. Then she went back inside and looked around. Empty. The chair by the fireplace without Clara. The kitchen table without the breakfast Arthur had made. Marcus walked up, rubbed against her legs, and meowed sadly. Well, Marina lifted the cat into her arms. Alone again. But the words sounded different than yesterday. No bitterness, just a soft sadness and something else. Anticipation. That evening, Marina straightened up the house and packed. Tomorrow she'd go back to the city, the day after that, back to work. Regular life was waiting. She remembered Marcus. Her aunt wouldn't be back for another week. Marina found a carrier in the closet, laid a blanket inside. You're coming to my place for a week. You'll survive, right? Marcus didn't argue. At 6 p.m., her phone buzzed. Marina grabbed it so fast she almost dropped it. A text from Arthur. We made it. Grandma's home, sleeping. Thank you again. How are you? Marina smiled at the screen and typed back. I'm glad everything's okay. I'm okay too. His reply came almost instantly. Grandma's been talking all day about the kind girl. She says you saved her. Marina snapped a photo of Marcus asleep on the couch and sent it. Caption, Tell Clara hello from the cat. They texted for another half hour, about the drive, about how Grandma seemed calmer than usual at home. Marina caught herself smiling at every message, and every new vibration made her heart beat faster. On January 3rd, in the middle of a boring work meeting, her phone lit up again. Hi, how's your day? I want to invite you for coffee. Grandma wants to see you too. When are you free? Marina covered the screen with her hand so no one would notice her smile. With pleasure. Maybe Saturday? Perfect. I'll be waiting. Saturday was bitterly cold, but sunny. Marina drove to Westchester around noon and found the address. A 5-story building, clean lobby, 3rd floor, apartment 27. Arthur opened almost immediately, wearing a cozy sweater and jeans, barefoot, smiling like he was greeting family. The apartment was small but cozy, bookshelves along the walls, live plants on the windowsill, framed photos, Clara young at a piano, Arthur as a child, family pictures. Clara sat in an armchair by the window. When she saw Marina, her face lit up. The kind girl came. Marina sat down beside her and took her hand. Hi, Clara. How are you? Good. Arthur feeds me and takes care of me. Good boy. They had lunch together at a small table. Arthur made pilaf. Turns out he could cook pretty well. Life taught me. He smirked at Marina's surprised look. Either you cook or you live on frozen dinners. After lunch, he sat at an electric piano. Clara perked up, straightening in her chair. Arthur played an old romantic song, slow, heartfelt, and suddenly his grandma started singing, quiet and trembling, but hitting the notes. Marina sat beside her, holding the old woman's hand, and tears came on their own, from the beauty, from the fragility of the moment, from the feeling that she'd touched something real, something you can't buy and won't find in expensive restaurants. That evening, Arthur walked Marina out to her car. They stood in the parking lot under a streetlight, seeing each other's breath. Marina, he started, then hesitated, then pushed through. I know it's early, we just met, but with you it's different. Easy. Right. Marina's heart was pounding so loud, it felt like the whole parking lot could hear it. I feel it too, she whispered. Can I call you? See you more. Get to know you. I want to try. You can, Marina smiled through tears. And you should. Arthur leaned in slowly, giving her time to pull away if she wanted. She didn't. Their lips met, careful, gentle, like the first snow touching the ground. A short kiss, but it held the whole truth and the whole hope. When they pulled back, they were both smiling. Good night, Marina. Good night, Arthur. She drove home through the night city, and for the first time in 3 years, after her parents' death, after the emptiness, after everything, she didn't feel lonely. She felt anticipation, not fear of the future, but curiosity about what was around the next turn. The new year had started strangely, with a breakup, with goodbyes, with an unfamiliar old woman freezing outside a gate. But that's how real stories begin, not with fireworks and champagne, but with a simple human choice, to help, to stay, to not walk past someone's pain. Marina smiled at her reflection in the window. Life was ahead, real life, without masks. And this was only the beginning. Sometimes fate flips our lives in a single moment, when we choose humanity, when we don't turn away from someone else's pain, when we open our hearts to what's real. Marina's story reminds us, the most important meetings don't happen on schedule. They happen when we're ready to see the real value in simple things, care, loyalty, the courage to stay true to yourself. What would you have done in Marina's place? Have you ever had a moment where one choice changed everything? Share your thoughts in the comments. We truly want to hear your story. If this story touched you, send it to someone who needs to believe that something real is still possible. And don't forget to subscribe. Here we collect stories about people who weren't afraid to be honest with themselves and with the world. Thank you for being with us. See you next time.